Shanti. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world listening to this. Can the panelists hear me?
Yes, yeah? Thank you.
Thank you. So today's topic, maturing with grace in Brahmin life. I'm remembering a story from Dadiji when she used to say that becoming a daddy is a little bit like making dahi vada. Dahi vada is a very popular dish in India made from, it's like lentil dumplings soaked in yogurt. And so you start off as a hard lentil, you get ground down into powder. From the powder, you become batter. And from the batter, you get fried as dumplings in oil, come out as formed balls, and then you get soaked in yogurt, sweetened yogurt, and then you get eaten. And so this whole journey from our tight costumes in Brahmin life, and perhaps the hardened bits of our sanskars, right down to being a light angel and a soft deity. So this journey of maturity that ultimately brings us back into a state of grace. And we're joined by 4 very experienced souls today. And so welcome to everybody here. And I know that you're thoroughly going to enjoy the next hour. So I'd like to hand over to Lois now to begin with the introductions of everybody.
Thank you, Gopi-ben. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Charlie Bai, Pinkesh, Rada, Shivani. So this is wonderful. So I will do a very, very short, quick introduction of our panelists, our guests. So we have Charlie Bai, very experienced brother, serving in Australia and Southeast Asia, with a very, very natural, experienced, and very polite, may I say, also brother. We have Sister Rada, who is she's currently in Italy, in the center in Rome. She also goes to work. She serves as an instrument. She's very warm and loving, and also quality of introspection is very strong in her. We have Brother Pinkesh, who has been grown up in UK, has been very close to Daddy Junkie for all his life. He's currently a director at the international accounting firm. He's a very experienced brother, very practical and straightforward. We also have Sister Shivani from USA. As she said, she's a double student, and she follows a master program and ready to enter the world of work. She's very active and enthusiastic sister. So without further ado, I think we can go straight into asking share your personal life story. So approximately 7 minutes, I will ring a little bell. Let's have a try. Just 1 second, okay. Here. So that will be the sound to wrap up your story, and then we will move to our next panelist. So I would like to start with Charlie Bai. You sent us your quote, from theory to experience. So can you please tell us a little bit more about your growing with grace? Thank you.
So thank you so much, Lois, and thank you, Gopi. And thank you all the lovely brothers and sisters scattered all over this world. I find it a bit amusing, I suppose, that I'm the older generation on this panel. Because when I started, actually, my first visit to Madhaban, I was in the courtyard one night and Shiluben said to me, "Come with me, someone wants to meet you." This was 1975. And she took me into Baba's room, and Baba was there in Baba's room. And Baba in those days would come and meet the daddies, and he was still a hands-on with running the yagya. And Baba was sitting, you know, when you sit in Baba's room in Pandav Bhavan, you face the translate, just to the left, there's a gadi on the floor. Baba was sitting there. And we sat in front of Baba and just chatted like children. And the thing Baba kept saying to me many times, "You are the godly young blood." You are the godly young blood. Well, unfortunately, I don't know whether I am anymore. You are the godly young blood, but it's a lovely thing that each generation brings its energy. And I think that, you know, maturity in this life is just an extraordinary journey. And I don't think you can just jump there. It's a massive learning curve in my own personal experience. And perhaps this whole thing for me, maturity is moving from a very theoretical, sort of devotional, religious approach to BK life, where we adopt the clothes, we look the part, you know, but internally, I'm still a different person, maybe a person from the past. And it's such a journey, I think, in my experience, to sort of relax and begin to just accept myself as I am. That I'm not like other people. I have my own unique specialties, but I'm here because Baba sees some value in me. But maybe two aspects to experience I just want to share very briefly. One was in 1985 that I often mention because it had a massive impact on my journey. When the double foreigners were sitting in Om Shanti Bhavan, Baba told us all to do the course again. And Baba said this, he called it the realization course. And he said to us, you know the knowledge, you believe the knowledge, you teach the knowledge, but you don't experience the knowledge. And that went bing in me, that really the journey to, if you can say, a maturity spiritually is when I unpack the truth and take out its essence. I unpack the truth of the soul. And as I unpack it and go so deep and do my research, I do become the embodiment of peace. I unpack, I do the work so that I move from this theoretical belief, which is a very religious and devotional approach to Brahmin life, and I experience, and it's experience which really, I would say, gives me that sense of spiritual power. And when Baba began to use the word children churn the knowledge, I began to change that for myself. Children experience the knowledge. And I think spiritual maturity is when I take the journey of theory and I keep exploring and experimenting. And I love to ask myself the question, how does it feel? So one part of experience, I think, is really the spiritual experience, creating new feelings inside. Otherwise, we get bored on this journey. You know, if I just keep going through the same processes of sort of believing and intellectually churning things, I get dry. I've got to explore and create new experiences internally. That's what will sustain me. But secondly, it's almost like you become life experienced as a BK. And as a new BK, I was so enthusiastic. And I think the level of change is often just habits. You know, as you grow up the second phase of Brahmin life, you begin to engage with the soft sanskars. Often I believe they're the sanskaras of recent births, you know, of seeing defect, of intolerance, impatience. It's a little bit of jnana and yoga. We shift them and we begin to feel, yes, I'm on the journey, I'm changing, I'm maturing, I'm growing. But often I think the third phase, we have a midlife crisis, and that can happen at any time, meaning that a lot of the stuff I thought I'd changed years ago erupts with a lot of force. You know, lack of self-respect, insecurity, fear, anger, lust, whatever it may be, can come back with a great force. And the soul starts to doubt itself and really doubt my capacity to stay on this journey. And yet, to me, it's all about a part of the process. The suppression is the bhakti sanskara. Just keep pushing it down. But Baba wants, and I think maturity is really being honest with myself. Maturity, I would say, is when I really learn how not to deceive myself, not to pretend or live in this sort of religious idea of what BK life is about, but I'm very real. And I'm not real in the sense that I put myself down and always focus on my weaknesses. No, I keep a balanced perspective, but I'm honest. Yes, this is my nature. This is my sanskara. The reason I've come here is to change. And I think sometimes that upheaval can lead to this beautiful mature, which is a grace in Brahmin life, a wisdom that you've been through. You've been challenged by your own impurity. And with courage, you know, you come out the other end and you learn to really face yourself, and you have the power to face, the power to be honest. And I've often found that those BKs who've been through the journey, been through all the phases, there's a really lovely sort of mellow vibration. It's a wisdom that is just apparent in their nature, because it's like a spiritual maturity of going through many things and ultimately coming to a place where I feel easy and comfortable about who I am. To me, maturity with grace is accepting myself, even though I live in a family with so many specialties, so many unique qualities, but I feel comfortable with who I am. And that's a real maturity and a real grace, which I think is a beautiful experience in this divine journey. So I have a feeling Lois is about to ring his bell, so I'm going to sign off before he does. So thank you anyway, Lois. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. Bye. So, so our next guest story is Rada. Rada is for you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And it's wonderful to have this opportunity to be in the youth gathering again after many years. So my story, basically, you know, my little piece was en route from having a hole in the heart to being wholehearted. And so, I mean, I was introduced to the Brahmin environment when I was just a baby, when my mother in 1977 took knowledge in Delhi Pandav Bhavan. And I guess, you know, the Brahmin environment was something that was very attractive and everyone loves little children. And so it was always great to go. And what I remember very clearly is the first few times I went to Madhuban and met Baba. I remember Baba saying to me one time that, have you learned how to give talks? And I was about, I think, 9 years old. And I remember looking at Baba thinking, Baba, you're making fun of me, because I couldn't speak to two people without blocking. I would in school, go to recite a poem, and then I would forget everything. And so it was, I remember growing up with this sense of really inadequacy, and, in spite of everything, in spite of gyan, in spite of, the Brahmin environment, I guess, life's events we still live in Kali Yuga, even though the confluence age is superimposed on that. But the my father passed away and other events, and so I guess also being at the end of the cycle, you kind of have a baggage of a lot of holes, a heart that's full of holes. And so this is what I experienced. And another blessing that just the year after that Baba gave me was that you are courageous, and you will perform wonders. And I remember especially keeping that in my heart at different moments where, in fact, I thought, oh gosh, how am I going to get through this? And I feel that it's that blessing of courage, and that, in a sense, Baba, um, with a twinkle in his eye, looking at me and looking at the future. And I realize now that, in fact, it was a blessing. It was, of course, Baba, with his love, but also, sort of pushing, which is, in fact, exactly how I felt a lot of things, that I've pushed myself into doing things that I would never have the courage to do. And I feel that, as I was growing up, I remember, being very, very close to. I love Gyan, and I love especially sitting in yoga. That was something that I really love to do. I think that I didn't really have a very deep understanding of Gyan at all. And it was really only when I left India, when I was about 18 years old and went to UK, that I started to begin to ask myself a few questions. And certainly in the youth groups, which were led mainly at that time by Lee James, I remember I feel so grateful for those years that I actually began to look deeper and begin to accept myself and come home again, in a sense, to wake up a little bit and put my hands in my pockets and say, okay, what do I have? What did I learn? What has Baba given me? And I also remember, thinking that what was important for me were things like freedom and clarity and consistency, being reliable, and many, many things that are still important for me. But I realized that at that time, especially when I was in my last few years of school, and when I finished school, I had to decide what I wanted to do. And I knew what I didn't want. That was very clear for me. That, okay, I didn't want to study more in India because I felt I would get lost there. I didn't want to go work. I wasn't quite ready to live in the center, even though, as a young Kumari, the the expectations are pretty high about that, especially at that time. And so I knew what I didn't want very clearly. But what did I want apart from just kind of merge into Baba's atmosphere? I didn't know on a practical level. And so coming out of India and coming into an environment where the intellect is kind of the first faculty that is used was something that was the best thing that I think would happen to me. And I remember when I had to choose where I was going to study, this was in UK, which place I was going to study. I remember going to Dadi Janki and asking her, Dadi, should I study here or should I study there? And the place that I wanted to go was a place where there was no center. And Dadi said to me, well, if you feel you're strong enough, go there. And I remember feeling so surprised by her answer because I expected her just to tell me what to do, you know. And so here I was having to make a decision for myself. And so it was like honoring myself and honoring my own opinion. And that's what counted. And that sense of having, you know, in a sense, Dadi was telling me, your freedom is in your hands. You can choose. And so at that time, I realized that actually I was not strong enough and I needed the structure of the family if I wanted to, you know, if I wanted to grow. But anyway, it was a significant moment to realize what it is that I needed to do in terms of growing inside. And so it's been a journey of coming back to wholeness and letting that falsehood burn away and get deep fried and, you know, come off, as Gopi was describing, you know, and then what's left is the true sweetness and the true, you know, what's true. And so this I feel is my ongoing journey. So I don't know if I...
Thank you very much, Rada. Thank you. Very, very lovely. Next, I would like to invite Pinkesh to share his story.
Thank you, Lois. Om Shanti, everybody. It's great to meet you all. So for me, when I heard this theme of maturing in Brahmin life, the thing that emerged spontaneously was this whole feeling of, when I look back at my life, was this whole thing about self-respect. And I think that was a very key ingredient in my growing up or maturing process, if you would like to call it that, was this whole aspect of self-respect. And Brother Charlie alluded to it when he shared about being comfortable in your own skin. So for me, that was the key ingredient and aspect that emerged. Now, for me, maturing in Brahmin life and maturing in life are one and the same thing. As Lois said, mentioned in the introductions, that you know, I came to Baba with my parents at the age of 7, 35 years ago. So, you know, you come to, all you know is the Brahmin world, the Brahmin life. So that is, you know, all you are in, that bubble. So, and every soul goes through this whole process of what I would call growing up, that process. And it sometimes can be painful. And it's amplified, some of that pain or that process growing up in the Brahmin family. That was my experience. And, you know, ever since a young age, you know, the family was so small back then and tightly knit. And, you know, there was a lot of love. You know, being a child, you're showered with love and attention and care, and everybody you feel a part of everybody. So there was this real sense of family. And with that came the expectations. You know, everybody had expectations of, you know, when I talk about the growing up process, I refer to, you know, the questions that we've all probably had or going through at the moment around, you know, identity, my role, my purpose, what should I do? All these questions. And everybody had a view. Everybody was projecting what they think I should be doing and who I should be and how I should be. You know, ranging from go and live in the center, you'll go and open a center here, you'll go and live in Madhuban, all these sort of things. And it's quite funny, it's quite refreshing here, Rada's story, because I knew what I didn't want, but I didn't know what I wanted. I clearly didn't want all of that in my late teens. That was absolutely not what I wanted to do. And I felt a sense of higher purpose, but I couldn't articulate it. And the more these projections were being, you know, portrayed to me and whispers in my ears, the more I didn't want it. And I was becoming more and more withdrawn, I suppose, would be how I put it. So there was a period in my late teens, early 20s, where, you know, there was a lot of timely interventions by really important people in my life. And we haven't got time to dwell on those stories, but there is a key story for me, which sort of really nailed the whole self-respect thing for me. So After I finished my studies, Daddy Janki's always been someone who'd been very close to me in terms of advice. The relationship had been a very informal relationship, having known her since the age of 7. I suppose that's one of the benefits as a child. You're very honest, and that honesty just continues. So we had a very honest conversation, and her advice to me was, I think what you should do is, choose a profession. I think, have some further studies. There's really merits for Baba's service, great development for you. So I decided to, on Daddy's advice, I decided to become a trainee chartered accountant. So anyway, after my studies had finished, I started work, and day one in the office, I had an absolute internal meltdown. What I knew is, I don't want to be here. I can't do this. This is alien to me. I want to get out of here. And it was just this sort of real uncomfortable feeling, but I managed to get through the day. And when I got home in the evening, my parents naturally asked me, how was your day and everything. And I just said bluntly, I'm never going back. That's it. I'm done. That's not for me. And, they convinced me to, go back, give it a few more weeks. Anyway, so the next day, I went to morning class at GRC. And in those days, Daddy Janki would read the Hindi Murli. And there was only about 8, 9, 10 of us. Sister Gopi was there at the time. And Daddy's way was, and it was all the way until the end, when she would read Murli, every minute, 2 minutes, she would stop, pick on an individual by name, ask a question just to see if you were alert, if you were listening, if you were understanding what Baba was saying. So same thing happened that morning. And after 5 or 6 minutes, she called out my name, and I was zoned out. I was absolutely, dreading with the thought of going to work after the Murli. And she must have picked this up. I didn't understand. I didn't remember the question. I didn't hear the question. And she said, are you okay? And I didn't say anything initially. And she asked me again. And I said, well, no, not really. I don't want to go back to work. And she just smiled and said, look, come and see me in the evening. So I went about my day. The thought of, I'll see Daddy this evening and she'll give me a magic bullet and everything will be all right. And, I got through the day. So anyway, I went back to see her in the evening. And this is the point, I think, where there was a big shift for me. So I went to see her. She gave me loving drishti, as she always did with everybody. And there was, that created that quietness within me, because I had all this stuff going on around in my head. She said, so what's up? And, I said everything I've just articulated. And again, she went in silence. She said, let's have a few minutes of silence. And after the silence, she handed me a notebook and pen that was next to her chair. And she said, I want you to write everything that you've attained from Baba since your childhood. And we sat in silence. And initially that was a very difficult process because there was a lot of blockage there. But after a few minutes, things started to naturally emerge, as you do when you're writing. And I must have filled out 2-3 pages of this notebook after 5 or 6 minutes. And I gave it to Daddy afterwards. She very lovingly read it. And then put the book away, held my hand and gave me great drishti. And there's 4 things that she said that sort of struck me and have stayed with me forever. And this whole aspect of being cemented in the seat of self-respect. The first thing she said, all these treasures that you've been given, you have to share these with all the people in your office, and not just people in your office, all the people who you will come in contact with in your life. The second thing she said that is, you are Baba's ambassador, and not everyone has the courage and strength to be Baba's honest child whilst being out there. The third thing she said, that your presence will uplift others. And the fourth thing was the skills and talents that you will develop being in a profession will be very handy in Baba's service. So these were the 4 things that she said. And after that moment, there was a quietness in me and just an acceptance of my part, my role, what Baba wants of me. And it was that point that I stopped asking questions. I stopped looking at others, which was a natural way. When you're trying to figure out what should I do, who should I be, you naturally look at other people and think, maybe I should become like so-and-so. At that point, I stopped that and just appreciated and valued everything that Baba had given me and my part. And that allowed me to appreciate everybody else's part. And that's what I referred to about self-respect, just being comfortable with who you are, why Baba's chosen you. And that's really led to, I suppose, that sort of maturity, being settled, and being comfortable with who I am. So Lois, I think that was the bell. So I will stop there.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear it actually, so I'm sorry.
So yeah, I think I'd finish. So that's what I would share. My thing, and sort of going back to just very quickly my quote of limited to unlimited. It was just this feeling that, you know, when you're a child coming into the Brahmin family, and it was a small yajna there, everything felt quite small. But you look now, everything's unlimited, vast, and the service we're doing now, it's unlimited service, sitting at home and giving the vibrations to the world, you know, serving through, you know, social media and the Zoom and such like. So it was such a feeling that, you know, my journey's gone from limited to trying to be unlimited. The yajnas follow that journey, and that's how I feel I need to be now. You know, taking Daddy's lead, she was unlimited in everything she did. So I'll stop there, Lois.
Thank you very much, Pinkesh. Thank you. So next guest is Shivani. So it's your turn, please. Thank you.
Om Shanti, everyone. Thank you. So my name is Shivani. I'm 23 years old and I live in California in the US. And my process of maturing has also quite literally been a process of growing up, because I was born in Gyan. And up until about a week ago, when I graduated from my master's in public health, I've been a double student my whole life. So I thought that I would describe my process of maturing as they relate to the three main phases of my life thus far, which have been my school days, my college life, and then being a graduate student. So in the beginning in school, in middle school, high school, as we would say in the US, I think part of my maturing was actually becoming comfortable with my own belief system. And I obviously knew that I was Brahmin, but when kids would ask me on the playground, what religion are you? Usually they're just looking for an easy box to check to be able to categorize you. So I would actually often say Hindu, because that's something that they would know, and no 10-year-old knew what a spiritual practice was. So then it was this constant evolution of then saying that, oh, I was Brahma Kumaris, which is a sect of Hinduism. And then I would say, as I grew older, okay, Brahma Kumaris, it's a blend of Hinduism and Buddhism. And now as my peers have matured and are also able to understand more complex ideas, now I can be more comfortable in saying, I have my own spiritual practice, you know, with a meditation organization, and would take the pulse of each individual to see how they would react or how much information they actually wanted to know. So it was this process as I grew of actually becoming more comfortable with articulating what I believed in to other people. And at that age, I also was often the conflict mediator in friend groups. So I was using Gyan with my mom's help in very yukti ways to create peaceful relationships among friends. And one thing that really helped in that whole maturing process was finding Brahmin friends who were further along in that process than I was. And there weren't many youth at our center, but I started going to the youth retreats in Madhuban at age 11. And those became like a yearly refresh button that really sustained me for the rest of the year and gave me a community that I could stay in contact with the rest of the year. Especially because although there are many religious people in America, where I was growing up was a very highly educated area. And so religion was sort of looked down upon. So it was valuable to have other youth to be able to talk to and explore my beliefs. And many of my BK friends have consistently been 5 to 15 years older than me. And so I was really able to learn a lot from their journeys that helped, I think, in that whole maturing process. So this second middle phase of maturing that was a big step was moving away from my home at age 18. And I actually moved across the entire country for university. And I lived in the hostels on campus there with other students. And I can tell you that I talked about my meditation practice and meditating with yogis on a mountaintop in my university applications, and that it was often asked about in interviews. It became something that was a very unique identifier to me. Although in college I had no car, and so I didn't have a way to easily access the center that was about half an hour away. So this was really my first chance to be BK without anybody watching me. And I had to figure out what worked for me and what practice I wanted to develop for myself. And that changed over those 4 years as well. And I was extremely busy, a very studious student. And luckily the Boston Center was very understanding of that. And we're always welcoming and not pressuring at all. So developed very good relationships there. And luckily with online everything now, I was able to access the Morley and Baba's transmissions and everything and develop my own practice. And Baba really protected me with good friends along all of this. I had friends of many different faiths, Jewish, Muslim, Catholic. We had great discussions about God. And the people who I made friends with the first week of school happened to all be people who didn't drink, didn't party. And we became close friends for those 4 years. And Dadi's blessing to me, having known me since a child as well, was also to always be an example or to be a sample. So meditating or my spiritual practice wasn't something I advertised to other people, but people could tell that there was something that was different. And one night, for example, I remember a friend who was going through a breakup with her boyfriend called me and asked me to come to her room and teach her how to meditate for the first time. So in their moments of need, people knew that I was there as a resource. And I had another advisor who would ask me she asked me one day why I was so much more mature than the other 20-year-olds that she knew. And she told me, okay, take a week, think about it and get back to me with an answer. And I said, I don't need a week. I can tell you it's because I was meditating in the womb and raised by powerful female yogis. So she said, yes, that will do it. And then this third big phase was going to graduate school in public health. And I moved to a new part of the country again. This time I was living independently in an apartment instead of in a hostel. So was more fully kind of on my own. There was no center in the area. And as a student, I always continuously relied on Baba for my studies. There was one evening I remember being stuck on an essay for days without knowing what to write. And then finally the deadline was there. So I put a photo of Baba in front of me, lit a candle and some incense and relaxed my body, and then called on Baba for my right to his help, and then opened my eyes at the computer screen again. And then the words just started coming out. So many, many different experiences like that. I felt Baba's protection always with friends. Once again, in graduate school in a new place, the people who I became friends with in the first week not only were non-drinkers, non-partiers, but also happened to live the floor above me in my apartment building. So lots of these very, what people call strange coincidences that I really saw as the drama helping. And I think one big step in that maturing process was feeling confident in explaining my beliefs to other people. So a few months ago, for example, I had a long conversation with a friend in medical school about her spiritual journey and life, and told her the essence of Gyan, and she just stared at me and said, oh my God, that makes sense. So helping others in their own spiritual process has been another kind of step in helping other people become more resilient as well. And the last few things I wanted to say were just about the fact that growing older is not the same thing as maturing, because there are plenty of adults who are not mature. And maturing is different than maturing with grace. And you can mature just by gaining more knowledge or experience, but doing it with grace really means staying authentic to yourself. So I'm continuously going through this process even now of examining my beliefs and making sure that I believe them because I experience them to be true and not because anybody else is telling me that they are.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say the last sentence was about that maturing also doesn't mean that you always have the answers, and that maturing with grace is also often about admitting what you don't know or are still figuring out or are learning from mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, knowing that where you are, Shivani, it's just 4:30 in the morning. So it looks like you are so alive and fresh for such an early time. So let's move on to the discussion part now, and just I think to start like this, maybe why not Shivani, if you would ask the first question to one of the three other panelists.
Yes, absolutely. So I have a question for Charlie Bai. Looking back, you shared some wonderful stories in your sharing as well. So looking back on your Brahmin journey over the past 45 years, how do you feel now, especially with Dadi Janki leaving? What has changed, and how can you describe your current stage in Brahmin life?
Thanks, Shivani, and really lovely to meet you again. I don't think I've seen you for a long, long time. I saw your parents recently, but hadn't really seen you. You know, after Daddy died, I had, maybe 10 days after Daddy died, I had the most incredible dream of her. And I'm a person who never dreams. I never remember my dreams. And Daddy came in front of me, and all I can say is her being was so joyous. It was a happiness which was unbelievable. It was just a happiness, radiant happiness, just coming through her face and her eyes. And in my dream, she came up to me and she kissed me and then she hugged me. And then, you know how Daddy used to hold and give drishti, and she just gave me this drishti that just penetrated me with this amazing feeling of happiness. And I suppose what I took out of it, and perhaps what's really been with me in the recent period, is Daddy's whole life was a life of love for God. Her whole life was built on love for God, and that meant she could conquer any obstacle in her way, this incredibly deep love for God. But the way she gave back to Baba was completely benevolent in every moment. And what I'm feeling myself in this time is the importance of benevolence, that I really feel in the Brahmin journey, we get to a point where we get stuck. We can't move forward because we're still playing this game of, I don't like this one, or this behavior is not right, the yagya should be this, the yagya. You know, we're sort of stuck on a bit of a human level. And yet all the seniors I've seen who really sort of merge into the angel, knowing everybody, knowing weaknesses, knowing everything, choose to become benevolent. And I'm just really feeling that this is a time to let go the limited thinking, the limited attitude, the stories, and absolutely step into my benevolence. I think this is the role of all of us. Why? Because my experience is the more the framework of your thinking is benevolent and it radiates through your being, how do you feel? You really feel divine, and your self-respect naturally grows. And I honestly feel this life is to be, you know, absorbed in Baba. And really my whole purpose of being in this physical world at the moment is to be benevolent, is to give love, to give kindness, to give forgiveness, to give support, to give cooperation. And that giving means that I stop the addiction to taking sorrow, taking disrespect, taking hurt. And really, if I look at Dadi Janki's life, you know what she was like at every millisecond, giving, giving, giving. And when I saw her in the dream, the happiness she was giving, it was just extraordinary happiness. It's a bliss I can't describe, really. And I thought, yes, that's the most beautiful life, to be in love with Baba and just don't judge, don't get caught up in all the reasons, just we're here, the angels are here to give. And that's really what I'm sort of feeling at the moment, especially seeing the state of our world.
So thank you, Charlie Bai. Maybe why not, would you take up a question and ask the our three other panelists?
Yeah, so it's really lovely to see Rada again, and Pinkesh. And, you know, I wonder what you feel has been the main thing that has helped you step out of what we all start with, that lack of self-respect, that sort of that vision on the self that limits and holds you down. What has been the main catalyst that's enabled you to step out into who you really are? Because I feel that's almost the key to really engaging well with this life and really moving forward. Don't know, Rada or Pinkesh or Shivani, one of you.
Shall I go, and then Rada and Shivani may have some thoughts to add. I think for me, it's been around faith. You know, you mentioned all the qualities of Daddy Janki, and I absolutely resonate with all of those. And another one I would add, just observing Daddy, was faith in Baba, that absolute unshakable faith. And so going back to my own journey, how did I personalize having faith in Baba? I suppose it's experience and confidence. And how did that come about? For me, it came about when, you know, as Baba says, you know, in the Murlis, we hear it all the time, unless you're absolutely honest with the doctor about your ailment, how can you be cured? You know, that we hear that often. So I suppose that honesty in relationships with Baba's instruments around, you know, personal development. So for me, there was that honesty and wanting to make a shift, to make a change. And when that honesty is there, you get the right advice, I would call it, from Baba via Baba's instruments. And then I think what it's incumbent on oneself is to have the courage to follow that advice and that instruction, that Srimad. And Daddy used to say, whenever she'd ask anyone to do anything or ask me to do something, you'd feel, I'd always feel, am I capable of doing this? I'd have this self-doubt. And Daddy would say, you know, all you need to say yes. By saying yes, that's your step of courage. And then Baba does the rest. So that was my evolution, or how I sort of, my development around faith is with courage. So I would say yes. When I heard the advice or was asked to do something, I would say yes. On the face of it, people would challenge me, ridicule me at times, thinking, why are you doing something like that? On the face of it, it feels quite, you know, it doesn't feel right. But I would just sort of try to block that out and thinking, well, this is Baba's instruction. What Baba said to me, you know, it's Baba's responsibility at the end of the day. And every single time when I did something, the fruits were so beneficial. You know, I could not have done something, you know, thought of something myself even, that would be the result. So for me, it's been around honesty. It's been around having courage. And with that, your faith just, I suppose, some people may argue faith is a switch, it's on and off, but for me, it's been something that's been a journey to have that faith in Baba more and more and more, and until there is just faith, that's all there is. So that's what my experience has been, you know, on this journey of self-respect, is having faith in Baba.
Maybe Rada would answer.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think for me, it was a kind of a slow build up, really, a slow accumulation of the pain of not doing anything about the whole issue of self-respect, being greater than whatever it was that I needed to do to break through that glass ceiling. And I remember going to Dadi once saying, Dadi, I want to clean out my subconscious, you know. And Dadi just looked at me and said, well, what do you have to clean? You know, and so in a sense, I realized that, okay, I need to do this in a different way, in some way that I have no idea. And I need to do it with Baba directly and find other ways that are going to, it was like I just couldn't stand the way I was, which was, a lot of the way was to put across a perfect image, and it was much more important what people thought of me rather than what I really was. And a lot of some of the things also, as Charlie was mentioning earlier, all the things that go on inside, and the self-judgments and the self-doubts that were just beginning to bother me in a way that I just couldn't stand it anymore. And I remember at one point going to Madhuban at a time where I never usually go, which was like November or something like that. And I went to Madhuban for 1 week, literally. And it was because Dadi had invited me to go for something else and I couldn't go. And then I ended up going at that time. And I said to Baba, I don't know why you're calling me, to Madhuban for this 1 week. But I know that it's a very significant time. And I went to Madhuban and I began to have conversations with one particular teacher, and that was like turning the key for me to come back into myself, to begin to look at my weaknesses, to begin to look at the things that I never wanted to acknowledge, that I never wanted to even go there. I was just denying completely because it was too scary to look at. And so it was like having lived outside of myself for many, many years. And so it was like that sense of coming home, from being homeless, even though you have a home, but you live on the street, that sense of complete insecurity and hyper vigilant and worrying about everything and anything that anyone might say or see or think about, and all sorts of, I think maybe these are familiar things to many people, but that sense of taking the courage to be who I am, and that it's okay. And so from that point, which was, I think it was about maybe 15 years ago, so not that long ago, and from that point, I began this journey of trusting myself and of listening to myself and of becoming, of actually valuing who I am rather than what some image that I think I should be. And so a lot of that, for me, it was that kind of, this decision that I want to be free from all these mindsets, from these false beliefs about myself, from putting myself down, from staying small. And I remember Dadi once saying to me that you don't consider yourself big, but don't consider yourself small. So you are neither big and you are neither small. And I love that so much because it just completely is who I am. And so I think that was one thing. But various things happened also that, in a sense, gave me the experience of my whole world falling down, and where I realized that, okay, what's left is Baba and me, and that's enough. Baba is 100%, even if I am 0.01%. Together, we are whole. And my task is just to increase my percentage, and with Baba, we will always be whole. And so...
So I'm just aware of time.
Right.
And at this point, would any one of you would like to ask a question to any other?
I have a question for Charlie Bai Lewis, if we have time. So Charlie Bai, this whole theme of grace, I see you as very graceful. For me, graceful is elegance, dignity, royalty. I see that very much in you, and that wisdom. And that wisdom has been accumulated over 45 years with Baba. So what would you say to a 21-year-old Charlie Bai going back, what would you say now? I'd love to hear, that accumulated wisdom. What would you say to yourself, a 21-year-old Charlie Bai?
Oh, Pinkesh. I think, I did start when I was just 22. And, I think I was quite self-conscious. I think, as Rada was saying, I was, it's a part of I suppose, the body conscious culture that you want to leave an impression in people. So you tend to build an image externally. And I think my initial days, even though, I really loved this life and everything, I was a bit self-absorbed, a bit self-conscious, a bit too intense, perhaps, about myself. And I think one of the huge lessons I felt in time, and I think it's only experience that can give it, is just to begin to really accept who I am and feel comfortable. And I can remember once thinking that, I made a decision, I'm going to enjoy this life. To be very frank, I've seen too many BKs who I think put so much internal pressure on themselves to be the image, that Baba speaks about. And yet I think this sort of journey, as you said so beautifully, Pinkesh, this journey to self-respect is a multi-layered journey, this biggest learning curve of healing the relationship with myself and fundamentally just relaxing, just accepting who I am and not trying to live up to an image and be something I'm not, and putting pressure on myself to impress and all the sort of stuff that actually saps the happiness in life. And so perhaps I would say to myself that, I don't think effort is all this bhakti idea of force and self-pressure and pushing. I never relate to that. I think it's a very, very subtle thing of really stepping into my self-value and really learning the art of accepting myself and just relaxing, just relaxing. I think, and for me, I think my whole journey has been punctuated with love. To me, love is what has kept my momentum. And I feel that it's our right as Baba's child to be loved completely. And for me, if ever I get to a little bit of a rough patch, I just sit in front of Baba as a little child, allow myself to be loved. I just feel that settles everything and that normalizes everything. So I'd just say, just move forward with so much love. There's not going to be another life in the whole cycle like this. Enjoy it. Don't labor too hard. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't try to be like other people, and try to live up to an image. Really, as Baba's child, be who Baba wants you to be. Be yourself. And I think that that's the advice I'd give to myself.
Does anyone would like to ask a question to Shivani, for example, or Pinkesh?
I can ask Shivani a question. It saves me answering a question, I suppose, if I ask a question. I suppose, Shivani, I'd love to get your thoughts, your views. Ever since I've known you, you've always been resilient, smiling, stable, that maturity's always been there. But I look back, where we are, where the world is right now, with the pandemic, the economic impact, et cetera, and I feel for those souls, the young body souls in their 20s, it could be quite sort of, losing hope. What about education? What are my, prospects? What would you say? You're in that position. What would you say? What keeps you, gives you hope? I suppose is the question that I've got for you.
You ask such easy questions. No, I think that every generation faces its own era of challenges, and this one is definitely one that will define a century. So I think just acknowledging that these really are kind of unprecedented challenges, and allowing the space for you and the youth out there to be able to process what's happening and the losses that are happening. I tend to always try to take a gratitude example, and a very silver linings person. So trying to find at least one seed of good in something that's happened. I think what's given me hope is spending an equal amount of time reading and hearing about all of the positive stories about humanity coming together, and not just all of the devastating news that we're hearing on the news every day. And really taking time to appreciate the unification that is also happening in many places, and people going above and beyond with their generous heart in many different ways. And there's many personal challenges that are happening now, and I take it as an opportunity to really reflect on how we've been doing life thus far. I don't think that anything can go back to normal after this. And so I think that the youth, as part of the change that's coming, as part of the next generation that will be inheriting all of these problems and also being part of the solutions, I think this is a very valuable time if you have the opportunity and space to be able to see what would you like to see as your future, as the society that you want to live in, and what can you do now in some small way to contribute to that. Even in a very physical way, there are many people in need. There's mental seva you can be doing, sending out sakash to the world. There are physical things, helping neighbors. So I tend to try to balance my different types of service, and I use this as a chance to envision what can we be after this as we're rebuilding, and what is the role of the youth as we're rebuilding after this.
Thank you. Fantastic. Any other question you would like to ask?
Can I ask Pinkesh a question?
Yes.
Pinkesh, you've got a big foot in the world at the moment, and in your professional life, you come in touch with so many people who must be feeling quite anxious. The world that they invested in or believed in is crumbling around them. So what do you say to clients, colleagues who are feeling very fearful, anxious, afraid about what is happening? How do you respond to them? How do you support them? How do you deal with that situation?
Yeah, good question. I suppose it's on different levels. The immediate level is empathy, listening. Just sometimes people just want to talk, want to verbalize what's going in there. So just listening has been one of the things. Secondly, it's quite interesting to observe. I don't know what it's like for everybody else, but in the UK, we're pretty much coming to end of month 2 of lockdown, and I've just observed over those 2 months, it goes to what Shivani was saying, how the human spirit is, how resilient human spirit is. So there was the initial shock, horror, the world is going to end type of feeling. And that's now moved to exactly how Shivani has said, the world will never be the same. So what would it be like? That positivity, starting to think ahead, starting to look ahead. And I think that is a great quality of all souls. We have, souls are generally quite resilient in that way of once that horror, the shock and the pain, the majority of people do start to look ahead, what next, and that is what I'm seeing. So that hope, that ray of hope is starting to shine, I'm thinking. So just helping to fuel that, being positive, and the other thing that I throw in there, more in a subtle way, we know, with Baba's knowledge that everything's cyclical, the cycle. So my view of even economics is things are cyclical. Boom and bust is cyclical. So it's that just sort of, in a practical level, that reassurance that actually, you can only have, nobody knows. You talk to 50 economists and they'll have their own view of what's going to happen next. Some people say the recovery is like a V shape, an instant bounce back. Some say it will be a U shape. Nobody knows. And I think what I try to do is focus on the positive thinking that things will get better. It will not be the same how they were, but they will get better. And just being positive. And I think that positivity is infectious because people want positivity. And it's just being practical with that as well. You talk about clients and colleagues, just giving very practical advice. Okay, so this has happened. What are we going to do to protect, to create, whatever it is, the next steps in that conversation that needs to be happened. So they're the various things that I've been doing, seeing, experimenting over the last couple of months.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are quickly running out of time. We have actually one space for one single question from our attendees. And so we can take the opportunity. There is a brother or sister Kajal. Maybe she could ask, or he asked directly. I don't know.
They might not be able to unmute themselves, so you might have to ask it.
Okay, maybe if you can unmute yourself. Maybe, yeah.
Hi, can you hear me? Om Shanti.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I have a quick question for Brother Charlie. And the question was, when he spoke about being myself and, just be authentic, I'm finding it a bit difficult at this moment, when how to be yourself and how not to be hard on myself when we are constantly being bombarded with the end is coming, and we need to be in a perfect form, and Baba's constantly reminding how to be the angelic form, and it's a bit I'm just so basically that's the question. So how to be myself and how not to be hard on myself when we are constantly being reminded that the end is coming and we need to be in a perfect form.
Thank you, Sister Kajal. I think one of my biggest lessons in my spiritual life is to be gentle with myself. I think almost all Brahmins, we're old souls, and as much as we have the incredible beauty of the first half of the cycle and our memory track, we have a lot of baggage in our memory track as well. And a lot of that means that our vision on ourselves is incredibly limited. And I really learned early in my Brahmin life that if you pay out heavily on yourself, I think that's a lack of really understanding of what Baba wants. And what I really learned is when I would see myself, the vision is very limited, quite self-critical, and I put myself in a box of limitations. I'm not like this, I can't be like that. But actually, what this life is to step into Baba's vision and feel how Baba sees you. And I think all of those who've sat in front of Baba, whether it's in meditation or actually physically in front of Bap Dada, Baba's vision sees past the present state. Baba sees the reality. It's me who's deceived. I'm so caught up in my present state and attached to the identity of now. And yet Baba sees who I really am. And I think so much of the knowledgeful soul is to step out of the addiction of my limitation and step into God's vision. And this is really the story of the yajna. And I feel that even though we live in a very difficult world, when you sit in meditation, just Step outside your own self-analysis, your own self-talk. And, you know, we get so self-absorbed in my life and how I'm feeling and what people think of me, and really sit and let God's vision see. Baba sees you in such an elevated way, but it's not that it's just a lovely feeling, it's actually reality. Because God sees the whole story of the soul from the beginning to the end. I'm stuck in the present. Body consciousness keeps me stuck in the present. So really sit in meditation and allow Baba to give you drishti and step into that respect that Baba gives you. It is very uplifting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, we are limited on time, and we are reaching the end of our conversation. I think it was really, really beautiful, all the exchange we just had. And just to give you a little bit of the numbers, we have been between 200 and 250 overall. And majority are, of course, between 18 and 35 years of range, and from 50 different countries. So I think that's wonderful. And I would like to thank Shalibai, Shivani, Pinkesh, and Rada again for sharing and asking each other very, very beautiful and very deep questions. So maybe we can all turn our, I don't know if everyone can turn their camera on, but if that's not possible, then we will say goodbye. And for the next time, thank you again.
Thank you for facilitating, Louis.
Thank you. Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Charlie Bhai, Shivani, Pinkesh.
And good morning, good afternoon, and good night.